I'm Nicholas Courtman. I'm the organist at St Petrock's Church in Harford, just on South Dartmoor there.
You've got some exciting plans for Good Friday. Can you just tell me a little bit about them?
Yeah, so our little community is putting on a service to mark Good Friday. It's an evening service, but we're actually using a passion that's just been newly written by myself for the occasion to use for the mission community.
What inspired you to write a new passion for Good Friday?
It was actually a trip to the Bach Festival in Leipzig that actually inspired it to begin with, but it's really lovely to see how Bach used music to really build his communities in and around Leipzig and bring that stuff together, and I just wanted to do something similar for South Dartmoor.
So what kind of music is it? What sort of genre?
Yeah, so it's certainly more on the Baroque end of things. So it's organ and traditional soprano, alto, tenor, bass choir with a couple of solo arias thrown in there for good measure. But there's also narrative as well. So we've got a local actor actually who's doing the readings in between the music.
You talk about Bach kind of using music to connect with his communities. How was the music inspired by the location in which you live and the communities in which you live?
Well, actually, that's a really interesting question because hugely. I often visit the River which is a beautiful place, and some of the melodies kind of come from that a little bit. But also some of the hymns that we use in worship sort of bleed into that. The most exciting one for me, however, is this incorporates a new hymn tune which I've written especially for the occasion. The words actually come from a local poet who lived in Harford about 100 years ago or so, a lady called Barbara McAndrew, and so actually setting some of her deeply religious lyrics to poetry to music is quite an honour and a challenge at times, but really fun.
It sounds really exciting. So how will the work be sort of performed on Good Friday?
Yeah, so it'll be part of this service. So it'll be, I'm building it around a service, so it'll be very much a series of, so we'll start off with a welcome, and then it'll just progress through the passion. So narrative, choral work, and then there'll be a pause at a particular moment, actually after what I'm calling the sort of the pinnacle moment. It's using the texts, my God, why have you forsaken me, set to a fugue for fun interest. And after that moment, I'm envisaging there'll be a moment of silence, and then our vicar will do some prayers. At that moment, we'll have a final number, and then it'll be the end. And I'm hoping people will leave in silence afterwards, because one of the underlying parts of this is a service. I'm not looking for perfection in this, and it's not a performance. It's definitely an act of worship for that.
How does writing music, especially this kind of sacred music, help you connect with your own faith?
Well, this is actually probably a really pertinent question for me. I actually grew up in a different part of the church. I was a Methodist growing up, and actually it was the music that drew me to the Anglican communion, the Church of England. To me, music takes me to a plane where I can just feel much more expressively about my faith. And as an organist, I strive actually primarily to create that environment that will help people also to enter that sort of, to enable people to enter a spiritual state very much. And I think music has that power to really enable that expression.
In sort of the kind of Anglican kind of formularies, it talks about us kind of telling the gospel afresh in this generation. And often in church music it can seem that there's either a sort of division between the favourite old hymns that you might play on the organ and perhaps some of the new contemporary worship songs. You're a young organist who's writing new music. So how do you feel about organ music or that more traditional choral tradition actually telling the gospel afresh in this generation?
Yeah, this is really interesting. I've taken part in my fair share of contemporary music, contemporary church music sort of worship. To me, I'm naturally drawn to the sort of the power and complexity that can be found within classical and traditional church music. I think the fact that this stuff is still relevant to my generation and generations below me. And we've seen this in terms of work of the Royal College of Organists in schools and stuff. This stuff is still relevant, and it's just part of the great tapestry, I think, of all musical expression from all different eras, and all of it has relevance.
Now, I know you said Harford Church is not that big. It's quite a little, beautiful church on the edge of Dartmoor. Are people going to be able to hear this passion in other ways if they can't squeeze into the church for Good Friday?
I hope so. I'm hoping to do a recording. The primary goal is obviously to use it as part of worship, but if I do manage to get a recording, I will be popping it on a YouTube channel. And I'll try and make that available to a wider audience.
And if other churches would perhaps like to try this next year, will the music be available?
Again, I'm hoping to. I mean, given that this is quite fresh, I'm still editing it and writing it as I go a little bit. But I'm hoping that once this use of it has happened, then I will try and formalise some of it and maybe look to either getting it self-published or at least hosted. I'm a big believer in open source stuff, so I'm happy to give it away, I think.
Well, Nicholas, thank you so much for sharing about it today, and all the best for the service on Good Friday.
Thank you ever so much. It's been a real pleasure.